Hi, I'm Micah Clark. Thank you for joining us today. On this Friday video, we have a special guest with us who's written a book. And I want to start off with something, a statistic I was looking at, because this will be where we wind up at the end of this interview. But I was looking at the impact of faith on culture and on people. And there was an interesting study I saw of 732 offenders released from prison that found that regular involvement in a Bible study significantly reduced the likelihood of rearrest by 26%, by reconviction by 35%, and by reincarceration by 40% of former prisoners. So there's a real role of faith in prison reform and in the lives of people. And we have a wonderful story from a good friend, someone I've known on the political scene for a couple of years, which made his book. His book is called Transformation. The author is Richard Bagsby, and I finished this last night. Richard, I told you this was a hard book for me to read because I know you, and it honestly hurts to read because I like you and admire you so much and respect you, and you've been through a lot, but through God's grace, your life has been changed, and it's always a wonderful story to hear someone's testimony, how the Lord worked in their lives. But I just want to basically start off with you telling our audience your story. Your book is called Transformation, The Untold Story of Richmond, and by Richard Bagsby. Now his name was changed by his father and mother later on. But Richard, just tell us your story, I guess, unless you want to start off with maybe why you wrote this book. But let's start there. What led you to write this book?
So, thanks for having me on, Micah.
Sure.
I definitely appreciate it. A lot of different variables. This book was actually thought about quite some time ago, probably back in 2020. So I've been ministering to folks that are, that have gotten out of prison, people that ended up heading to prison, drug addicts, a lot of folks from, the other side of the train tracks, if you will. And the way that I ministered to them is through my testimony. And I believe that, when a mentor or a counselor can relate to those who they are counseling and mentoring, I think that has a huge effect and impact on those folks. And of course, through faith in God and how God uses you and you allowing God to use you. So with those things in mind, I really felt led to write the book because so many people know my story. And when I say so many people, I mean people that have gone through similar things that I've gone through, from early childhood to adolescence to young adult. And it wasn't until I think 2021 that I actually started to write the prologue. But the time wasn't right, and with all things, you have to be in God's time, and just the time wasn't right. I was traveling the country a lot at the time as well. And so the beginning of this year, I decided, or actually it was last year, so it was back in December, I decided to run for office and take on an incumbent. And, I prayed about it, I fasted, I meditated, and so I decided to take the plunge and do it for solid purposes. The person that I'm running against, the incumbent that I'm running against, and I won't get into any of that stuff, but basically he's a very immoral person when it comes to faith, when it comes to family, when it comes to parental rights and protecting children. And so I felt called and led to run against him. Now, in the midst of that, I thought about my story, and it wasn't that I was shying away from it because everyone knows that I'm very open and transparent about my story. But it was the fact that, I thought about, they're going to bring up my past and they're going to do all of these different things. I was kind of thinking about a rebuttal, like a snarky type of rebuttal in my own fashion, in the way that I am. Well, I can't remember the exact day, but I remember vividly God waking me up at 3 a.m. and on the dot. I looked at my phone. It was 3 a.m, but I was wide awake, and I could feel the Holy Ghost telling me, "Don't allow anyone to tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
Don't allow anyone to cherry pick your story. Don't allow anyone to cherry pick your past. Feed them the whole scroll." That's exactly what it was. I felt the Holy Spirit telling me, feed them the whole scroll. And right then and there, I got up and I rewrote the prologue. And about 10 months later, you have that book in your hand. That was the product. That was the finished product. And God really guided my thoughts, gave me recollection. And I just thank God for what he has done in my life, and the obstacles that I faced throughout my life to get me to where I am now. And honestly, I tell people all the time, God called me to run this race, and to compete. But that doesn't mean that he called me to win. But I'll tell you this, that through that, he allowed me to finally write that book that I believe that he's going to use to help a lot of people who are struggling with their inner child, the trauma that they faced when they were a kid that they couldn't overcome at the time. But I believe that he's going to use this book to help them get through it. So,
well, I think your book in and of itself is a victory. And before we get into it, I kept having a thought as I got to the end of the book, and just kind of before you lay out your story, I just have this one question. At the end of Joseph's life, and we know what Joseph went through: sold into slavery, accused of rape, thrown in prison, forgotten. He said, "What some meant for evil, the Lord meant for good." And that's hard to say when you've been through things like you've been through. But is that where you'd say you are right now?
Yes, definitely. And I couldn't say this before. Years and years ago, I could not say that. Years and years ago, I questioned, why did I have to go through all of that?
Yeah.
I didn't ask to be here, but because I am here, and I had to go through all of that, and now I'm the finished at the time I'm the finished product of corruption at so many different levels, yet I'm still here and not understanding the whys of it. Right. But now I look back and I see the masterful artwork and creativity of God and the purpose, his purpose for me. Even though, I don't understand the totality of it, but I am now to a place where I can see the whys, right? Yeah. And I remember I meditate and pray every single day. And that question used to haunt me. God, why? Why did I have to go through all of that?
Yeah.
And I remember in one of those tirades, and you read in the story how I can get real aggressive with God.
Sure. Well, David did too.
Like why, right?
Yeah.
But the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit said to me, "If not you, then who? Who could I've chosen to be strong enough to endure it and tell the story at the end?" You know, so.
Well, I'm so glad you did. Let's get into your story. The book is called Transformation by Richard Bagsby. I'll show you the cover again. Well, Richard, I'm going to wind you up and let you go. Tell us about your story as much as you want to share from the book on your journey. You were born in Gary, Indiana. Let's start there and take us. You went back and forth to Oklahoma several times and different parts of Indiana. Just share with us what you want viewers to know about your book and your story.
So the book takes place from a point of reflection. And it was last Christmas. The book kind of takes place last Christmas, where I'm 42 years old and I'm watching my children and my grandchildren. They're opening presents. And as they were opening presents, and a lot of people know this about me, sometimes, I go into a reflection mode when I'm looking at the present. And I think back on times when I was younger, because I'm always analyzing myself and measuring my cognitive standpoint at the time. And so it was during one of these reflections that I thought about when I was my 6-year-old son's age, because I was watching him open his presents. And I thought about how, at 6 years old, in the prelude, takes place at a Walmart in McAlester, Oklahoma. And I'm lost. I'm lost in Walmart at 6 years old. And I can't find my mom. And the fear of being lost is great. And I just feel overwhelmed. And as you read in the story, a Walmart employee, an older lady, she asked if I needed help. And I said, yeah, I lost my mom. And so the story kind of takes place from that point of being lost, that feeling of being lost, and how that feeling of being lost chased me throughout my life. And, at 6 years old, I'm in Chicago, Illinois, at my father's barbershop at the time. And I'm wanting to stay with my father. But my mother and my grandmother has other plans. But unbeknownst to me, my father was actually heading to prison for 5 years. And so my mother, she takes me to McAlester, Oklahoma with my brother. And, we live a life in fear in McAlester from my stepfather, who was very abusive, physically abusive and verbally abusive. And, at 6, 7 years old, we're getting literally beaten on a regular basis. And so during the story, you find that I go from one abuse to another abuse of sexual abuse, because I'm trying to run from the physical abuse in my mother's house. And I run to my grandfather's girlfriend's house or apartment at the time. And, her son is sexually abusing us. And so I'm running from one thing to another, where it gets to a point where, I'm 6, 7 years old. And now my brother and I were hiding in the woods most of the time. We are in the woods hiding from everyone, and how we survived that, looking back, obviously, was the grace of God, because I couldn't imagine now, as I have a 6-year-old. And that's kind of how the story started, me just looking at my 6-year-old and just like, man, him and I are exactly the same, but our environments are completely different. But God allowed me to survive it. And so moving on through the story, in a nutshell, the story is describing how corruption infiltrated a child. And as the child grew inside of its environment, that seed of corruption grew with it. And it developed into a maladaptive behavior, a maladaptive mentality, where all the child knew was corruption, and it was raised by corruption. And so by the time I reach 8 years old, you find that I'm abandoned inside of a building. So my mom, she escaped the abuse of my stepfather, and takes us back to Gary, to my grandmother's house. And she somehow, some ways, get back with my stepfather. They whisk us off again, but we remain in Gary, Indiana, though, at the time. But they leave us in this building. So at 8 years old, I'm inside this building with my brother, who at the time was 6 years old. And we're inside of an attic. And now we're going through abandonment, because we were abandoned for a few months inside this attic. And in the attic of this abandoned building, you find these two scared boys. scared little boys. I mean, I'm 8, my brother's 6. And at night, there's heroin addicts that would come inside of this building. Well, they didn't know that we were up there, but they would do drugs and, party and do their thing down there. And, to stave off hunger, I had to be brave enough to go down there and steal their food. And so I tell people all the time, especially when I'm mentoring people, that, I became a thief. I learned how to steal, due to my circumstances, due to my environment at the time. Don't get me wrong, but that's how corruption starts. It starts a lot of the time, through opportunistic, situations. And so I'm sneaking down there to steal food to bring it back to my brother, so that we can eat. And then, you fast forward the story, now I'm 10 years old. We're back with the stepdad in Oklahoma. And, I find out that he's a drug dealer. And so he uses me to find drugs for him. Mm-hmm. He would basically drive through the countryside and throw out these bottles, these empty pill bottles. Well, he would put cocaine inside these pill bottles and just throw them out the car. Apparently, looking back, obviously so that he wouldn't be caught with them personally. And so, we would have to ride with him and recover these pill bottles when it was time for him to sell the pill bottles to other people. And, I became his drug mule at 10 years old. So at 10 years old, I become a drug mule. And, he shows me the cocaine. He has me deliver the cocaine to his customers. And that's kind of where I picked up the buying and selling of drugs. And, I entered that lifestyle. Right. And, I think, it just progresses from there. Mm-hmm. At, I think 13 years old, I reunite with my father in Chicago, Illinois, and I meet my father's side of the family. Now, my father's side of the family, they're all, drug dealers, thugs, killers. They are the people you read about in the newspaper. They're the people that, you see in the movies, right? My father, he greets me that, there's a place where I meet up with him, and then the next day I wake up and he's pouring out hundreds of thousands of dollars from a duffel bag, on my chest at 13 years old. And so, I, as a 13-year-old, seeing all this money and seeing that, oh man, my dad, he must be something. And now I immediately am looking at my dad like a hero of some sort. Mm-hmm. And so I never questioned it. I never questioned the environment. Never questioned, the way things were. But even in the story, you begin to understand that I am conscious of, I guess in a way it was more or less me looking back and analyzing my mindset, and I'm allowing the reader to be inside my head a lot, mm-hmm. as I'm processing this, right? And so, the summer of, maybe it was 98, 97, something like that, or 95, 96. I'm in Chicago, and I'm learning all the ways of corruption. And I think there's a chapter called Heir of Corruption. And so in that chapter, I realized that my father was actually a guy who ran a criminal organization, if you will. And he's a big guy in this, in Chicago. And my brother and my half brother at the time, I meet him as well. And my cousins and just, they teach me all the ways: gambling, mm-hmm. selling drugs, drinking, I think even smoking weed, at the time. And so then the summer ends, and now I have to go back to Oklahoma. And you see in that chapter the transition. It's a full transition now. Whereas I'm not a naive kid that's been abused and been abandoned and woe is me. Now I'm a kid who has learned how to ignore that part and ignore the woe is me and have a fake sense of confidence. And now I'm a bad guy. You know, I'm a bad guy like my brother. I'm a bad guy like my father, you know, and now, you know, I'm developing a personality where I don't want the world to victimize me. You know, I don't want to be a victim anymore, right? And so you find that when I go back to Oklahoma, I am corruption has fully embraced me, and I embraced it. And so now the story goes from 13 to 18, and now, you know, I'm selling weed, I'm selling cocaine, I'm just doing criminal things, and I'm very candid in it too. I don't hide anything. It's God just led me in a way where I just wanted everything to be very raw, and I wanted it to be story mode where people that are reading it, the intended audience. So the intended audience are those who can relate to that story, who's gone through it. And I think I do a very good job in conveying that message. Now, at the end of most chapters, there's mentor sessions. Yeah. And those mentor sessions have been installed for people that are reliving. See, because the way that I lay the stories out, they're very emotionally impactful. Whereas if you've gone through that, your heart is pounding while you're going through those chapters, because you're reliving things that you've forgotten about and things that you've tried to suppress. And so because of that, and I thank God, because I actually wrote 7 chapters before I started to install mentor sessions. And it was one of those 3 o'clock in the morning type things that, hey, you know, you should install some mentor sessions to help people get through that. So they're not just reliving it, they're able to overcome it. Right. And so I have a lot of mentor sessions in there, and they're set out almost as one-on-one counseling sessions, therapy sessions. And I think that's what makes the biography very unique, because it's a biography. It's a hybrid biography and self-help book. And so it's a march, right? From 6 years old to prison. At 25, I go to prison. That was the sum of my best laid plans. Landed me in Westville Correctional Facility. And now they meaning the world, because I blamed the world. I was a blamer. I blamed the world for it, and then I blamed God for it. You know, you find it, I think it's at 18, I try to drown myself, but it didn't work. And become lost in drugs, lost in alcohol. And I tried to get it together. And I go right back to it. And it's, you know, due to circumstances in my own mind at the time, that I've tried everything. And so now I'm going to go back to what I was used to. And it ended up landing me in the penitentiary. And so in the penitentiary, now they have captured all my rage and violence. And so now I'm very vengeful, vindictive, and I'm very violent. And I fight all the time, and I'm just unraveling at the seams, and there's no help for me. And, but there was a silver lining while I was incarcerated, and that silver lining was God's providence. There was a guy that would come in and play chess with me, and in the story, it shows how he would leave scriptures. He would leave scriptures, you know, in my cell. And at the time, I was very combative. You know, I wasn't trying to do all that. I wasn't in there to find God. or anything like that. But God did find me. God found me in there, and he took me through a vision. I don't want to explain it on here, but that's that vision that he gave me was my testimony of how my heart changed. And in prison, I became a counselor. I became a mentor. I counseled hundreds of men. I helped hundreds of men overcome their childhood traumas. And so that's kind of, I guess, a short synopsis of the book. But the book is a very comprehensive book. I mean, at the end of it, there's a comprehensive glossary of terms, emotional intelligence, terms that I use, right? Maladaptive behaviors. And because my intended audience are those who may not be very well educated in words. They may only have an 8th grade education. And so I wanted it to be very hands-on and accessible to, what does he mean by that? Well, if you go to the glossary, you'll see that term is not just a glossary of words, it's a glossary of terms. Is there. That way it can enlighten them. I used to do a lot of reading in there, and I remember reading, I would have to go to the dictionary all the time because I didn't know what those words were, and then when I looked the words up, I'm like, oh wow, that's me. That explains this emotion, or that explains this feeling that I have, right? That explains this urge that I have. And so everything that God did for me, I tried to put inside the book. And I just show from front to back, it's the story of the caterpillar to a butterfly. It's the story of a transformation from a unfortunate circumstance, unfortunate environment, unfortunate parents. My father was married. My mother was his, was his fling, was his mistress, right? And it tells of a bleak future for a child, but it also tells a story of triumph and how God can use anyone in any circumstance for the betterment of his kingdom and the betterment of his will. But not only that, it shows defying the odds. And now I'm running for office. My record's been completely expunged, and I'm a proper citizen in the eyes of the federal government, in the eyes of the state government. I'm a proper citizen, and God has just showed me favor and grace, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I'm really hoping that God is able to use this for His benefit.
The thing I like about the book, I said it was hard for me to read because we're friends and I know you, and I actually did not know this about you until I read the book. So it was somewhat painful to me to read knowing you personally. But the book is not graphic. It's somewhat intense, but I would say if you're worried about some type of sexual details or something, don't try to read this book. No, you did a very good job of letting us know what happened without getting into dragging us through the mud. So I appreciate that. And like I said, there's 33 chapters in the book, and there's about 30, couple chapters run together, but there's about 30 help sections for a couple pages after each chapter to discuss what this meant to you, how you see it now, what the Lord's done, how it can help other people. So I think it's a good read just for anybody who's interested in a wonderful story of redemption, but it's also a good read for somebody who has had some of these similar or other struggles in their life and how the Lord can use them. So I know it took a lot of courage to write the book. Tell our audience how they can get the book. I mean, I got it from you, but how can people buy the book? Is it on Amazon or other places?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. The paperback is on Amazon, and the digital copy is on Amazon as well.
Okay.
I do have it on Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble's approved the digital ad, and the paperback will be approved in a couple more days, and then we'll have a book signing at Barnes and Noble. But today actually, I have 15 books being dropped off today. And so they can also reach out to Micah. They can reach out to you, and you can kind of point them to my direction, give them my number or whatnot, and I can send the book to them.
Sure.
I mean, I've sent this book all the way to Florida, and and if they get it from me direct, then they'll have my signature on it, and some sort of phrase on there, and the date.
Yep.
And then I encourage those that have gone through this to read it and to share it. But I also encourage those who have not gone through it that can read it and share it with the loved ones that they know. Because the book is the mentor sessions, those sessions are laid out in such a way where you can use that as a person who's never gone through any of that. You can use that to touch the heart and prick the heart of a person who has gone through it. And if any type of social workers, any type of counselors that's having a hard time reaching those at-risk youth and those young adults who seems impossible to deal with or seems like a lost cause, you can use this book to change them around, definitely.
Well, one last question before I let you go. I have to be careful because we're a 501c3, but you're running for state senate in the Lafayette area. If you're elected, how do you think this life story would affect, or maybe your public policy agenda in terms of maybe recidivism or prison reform or law and order? Have you thought, or counseling? Is there anything that you've thought of that might, where these two tie together?
Yes. So as far as prison reform goes, the biggest thing is creating a standardized program for all people who are going through incarceration on a county level and on a state level to go through a therapeutic type community. And I'm not talking about a rehabilitation program. I'm saying a therapeutic community, a simulation of real life where there's jobs inside of the program, where there's counselors inside of the program, where there is a structure inside of the program. And it's a program similar to what I experienced. And it's not available everywhere, but it should be, because you'll find that a lot of people that have gone through those types of things, they have such out of touch mentality when it comes to society. They don't know how to contribute to society because they don't know how society works. They don't know they don't know how politics work. They don't know how a job interview goes. They don't know how the structure of just waking up every single morning at 5 a.m. to show up at work at 6 a.m. They're not used to that. And so when you put them inside of a bubble, a simulated reality, the reality that I was in, we policed ourselves. We had 7 different departments that had department heads and had department members, where the members were actual laborers. They worked in different facets of that department. And then there were the different heads of the department were voted in. So we had a voting system. And then the top of the house members, there were like 12 top of the house members. I became one of them, but I had to be voted in, and so all of that makes up a society, and we had an infrastructure in there. And so all of that makes up a society. And so if we could push things of that nature and get people truly rehabilitated, I think you'll see the recidivism rate drop, and you won't look at people like me and say, oh, well, that's just he's an outlier. He's a variable. We don't normally see that. You'll see people like me come out of there all the time, and it'll be it would be a normal thing. And then by doing that, I believe in the long term, you'll see incarcerations decrease. You'll see crime decrease, because people, especially the fatherless, especially in the Black community, suffers with fatherlessness. With a program like that, you will start to see more accountability. And that's what the program was about. It was about being accountable to yourself, being accountable to your family, being accountable to your community and your church community. And with that, and an institution of faith, an institution of belief in what God can do for you, you mix all that stuff up, man, you'll get a really great citizen. And I've seen people come out of there and go back in, but I've also seen people like myself that has made a complete turnaround and now is a very successful person in society, a very productive citizen, and is changing the lives of other people. So as a senator, that's what I would do.
One part of your story that I have to mention, I know, real quickly before we go, you did something also very important. I think that when you got out, you reconnected with your child's mother, who is now your wife, and kudos to you for that. She must be a phenomenal woman. But
she is. Shout out to Sarah Bagsby.
Yes. So there's a couple chapters about her, and God brought you guys back together, and that's been a huge part of your life too, I know. So, and now you're a grandfather too, I think. Yeah.
Yep. 6 grandkids. You awesome. know, and they don't know anything about that life. It's God allowed me to break the chain, so break the cycle. So.
Well, appreciate your time. I know you're at a conference today, so I'll let you go, but I really appreciate taking the time to explain the book. The book is called Transformation by Richard Bagsby. If you're interested, let me know. I'll contact you, put you in touch with Richard, or we'll get a book to you, or it's on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and I think it's a great book. And Richard, thanks for your time. Best of luck in your future endeavors.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for being vulnerable and pointing people towards Jesus as well.
Amen. Thank you, Micah. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Well, I'm Micah Clark. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this look in someone's life who's Hoosier, who's been through a lot, but through Christ, his life has been changed through. And it's a great book. The book is called Transformation by Richard Bagsby, Bagsby, Richard Bagsby. Look it up on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. But I hope you enjoyed this time. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'm Micah Clark with American Family Association of Indiana.